Okay, on here we have our diagram of our transistor. We have a primary winding, a secondary winding, and our iron core, as well as our spark plug connection. Now, on here you have a transistor which will take your battery system voltage and turn it into thousands of millivolts, and that's how it runs your system. Here you have your power and your ground for the primary winding. And as you can see, the primary winding is bigger and looser than the secondary winding. And then from your primary and secondary winding, you have your connection that goes from the bottom of the winding down through your spark plug connection, and that's how you get your voltage that flows into your spark plug to produce that spark. Okay, so here we have a spark plug and your gap adjustment tool. And what you want with the gap adjustment tool is you stick it in here and you can adjust the gap based on that, and it will measure the gap of the spark plug, which you can find for your particular vehicle and specification. Then you also want to make sure you use the right type of spark plug. Different spark plugs have different lengths. They also have different thicknesses in the thread. Also, some of them are rated differently for heat, as well as the different types of electrodes. This is an iridium spark plug. These are very well rated and recommended. Okay, so here we're doing spark plug testing, and when you're doing this, you're going to use a tester, and you make sure you have your ignition coil, and the way you have a spark plug, you plug in your tester. You want to make sure that you have power and ground to it. Here we have the ground to the motor, and inside you can see when it's sparking, and that's how you know that the spark plug is good. And there are more than one different type of spark plug testers that are available. Here we have a trainer set up with an oscilloscope over here, and what this is showing is how to check the saturation time and the signal coming from the signal wire at the coil of a spark plug coil. And for doing that, your top line is your saturation time, and here is your reference or signal. And as when you start the vehicle, it should move, and here's how long it is doing in between the time it's firing. And basically, you just want to make sure that it's within the specification for your vehicle. This is a really useful tool to have to make sure that you're having proper timing when your spark plug is firing. Okay, so the next one we're going to go over is to check the ground path of the coil. And when you do this, here is an example of a coil over plug setup. As you can see, the coil and the connection for the spark plug. So with this, different types of coils depending on if it's a 2-wire or a 3. If it's a 3-wire, there's chances are that there's a ground that you can find and back probe along the connection into the coil itself, and you can check your ground that way. If not, we have a different one here, and here is an example of a 2-wire coil with a transistor. And for this one, the best way to check this is there's a transistor inside of the PCM instead of the coil itself, and you can find the wires that go to this injector coil and trace it back to the PCM, and you can ground it and back probe at the PCM and check your ground there, and that'll tell you if you have a good ground or not at the PCM instead of being able to do it at the coil, like example on this one. When checking for power at the coil, when you're checking for voltage at the coil, you can check in a couple different spots, and it's easy to do this. And one of the best ways I think to do it is you can find this wire that runs from the transistor to the PCM and check at this connection. But if you can't get to this one, if you can get to this one, you could back probe the wire here and see what your voltage is at this connection here. If it's good here, then you might want to try to move on to check this, and you can check along the wire. On this one, being that it's got a 3-wire, you have these connections here. Along either one of these, you should be able to check this. This should be your signal reference wire. You can check this, and you can try to get power along either one of these wires. If you have your signal and your power, then your connection to the PCM and the coil should both be. Okay, so here we're using a diagram as an example, and we're going to go over how our ignition coils are powered. And here you can see we have our ignition coils, and there's a bunch of different colors running from here. Some of them run together. This green is where they run together. We have a ground right here. The orange wires show where it runs into the engine control module. The blue wires, some of them run over to the fuel injectors, and then some run to the engine control module, and there's one blue and pink wire that run over to the underhood fuse block over here. And when you're over here, you have a 10 amp fuse. It's fuse 45 on this particular car. It's an ignition module fuse. And you can see where the fuse runs along and back to the powertrain relay, and this fuse is going to be hot at all times. Alright, so here we have a spark plug gap tool and a spark plug, and how you would want to do this is you find this on here on the gauge. We have different sizes, and for this one we know that the measurement is 44. So you find the 44 and you slide in here, and you want there just to be a slightest little bit of drag when it goes through. That's how you know your gap's right. But if you have to adjust it, you can slide it through here and adjust and try to gently lift it in order to adjust the spark plug gap if necessary. Okay, so here we have a spark plug, and with this we're going to go over the thread size, the reach, and the heat range of the spark plug. The heat range is how well the spark plug will dissipate heat. The reach is the length of the thread and how long the spark plug is. And the diameter is the thickness of the thread. Most light duty vehicles today use a 14 or an 18 millimeter spark plug, and that refers to the size of this thread here.